Okay, the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission will now come to order. All our members are here, even our council members on time today. That was a, well,
I was early.
You're early.
and he's always on time.
He's just banking time.
Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? Does anybody, well, first of all, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Item D, has everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
Move the minutes from the last meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next item we have is, Scott, could you bring us up, Susan, well, first Susan, could you bring us up to date on non-residential
Did not have a
design review
meeting.
committee?
There was no meeting.
Okay, thank you. Scott, could you bring us up to date on the town council actions, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. The town council did meet yesterday. We discussed and voted to move forward the sections, ordinance sections 425-2 and 425-27 with a couple of minor changes. So those are, we're getting to the culmination of the hard work that planning and zoning has put into adding sections to the code regarding pervious and non-pervious pavement. Great work by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you all for that. We also, related to planning and zoning, adopted, the town council had worked with us to prepare a procedure for how ordinances will get developed moving forward. For the Planning and Zoning Commission, so we adopted that. Importantly, we set a date for public hearings, public discussion on the Wellington, Kent, and Collins Avenue pedestrian improvements. So mark your calendars. This should be a fun one. Friday the 13th. I don't know. We didn't discuss why we would do it on Friday the 13th, but we're doing it. At 3 p.m. we'll discuss Kent and Wellington, and at 5 p.m. we'll discuss Collins. There will be no votes at that time. That is just simply to hear from the public about the plans. And also importantly, we voted to cancel the December town council meeting, so we will meet next in January.
Thank you. I was at the meeting, and I appreciate the town council's concern to make sure everybody could come to the meeting on January 13th, not to exclude anyone.
Sorry, I misspoke there. Town council will have a special hearing in December to review additional chapters of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, great.
That'll be, I think, the 12th, December 12th? Yeah, December 12th.
Mr. Chairman, just one comment on the ordinances that were passed on open space and so forth. It reflected the input from members of the community, particularly developers that were looking to have percentages in it in terms of what the spaces were and so forth. And that was taken into account and will be part of it once it goes into effect. Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public or questions to the commissioners? Thank you. And I may add, I'm glad to see most of the council here again, as usual. The donuts do have an impact sometimes.
Enticing.
We have no new business. We have some old business. We're going to have a brief update on the comprehensive plan subcommittee work on Chapters 6 and Chapter 7. Mark, are you going to handle that, right?
Yeah, sure. So I think we talked about this last month, but just to build on this a little bit more, the subcommittee comments have been returned to the IPA team. That happened earlier this week. This is actually for 6, 7, and 8. So those final chapters. We were hoping to share that updated or sort of semi-final draft with the Planning and Zoning Commission ahead of next month's meeting, or as soon as it's available, so that way we can, everyone can take a look at it, and we could continue progressing forward and finalizing all of that. One thing, I guess, for the group, I don't know if it's helpful if we walk through any sort of final feedbacks of the whole document together, or if the method that has been going with just emailing me works better. Either way works, but I guess if we want to scroll through that at one of the upcoming meetings, I could be prepared to do that, or put it on screen to do that. But up to the group how we want to collectively sort of finalize the final draft comments. And then I think that's it, yeah, for that.
Let me throw that Mark's question to all the commissioners for preference of what to do.
I'm happy either way. If the format of just continuing to give me comments via email is preferred, I'll package them up for the group. If it's helpful to do one pass of all chapters together, happy to facilitate that too at one of the meetings, but whatever you all think is best.
I guess there's only 3 of us that
Yeah.
are not on it anyway. Kathy?
How many more chapters do we have to go?
I think it's just these 3.
Just the 3?
Because one got consolidated. Am I
Okay.
correct? Right.
Okay.
And we're on schedule? Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry. Assistant Town Manager, I'm sorry.
We are pretty much on schedule, but it's going to be tight, and so just as a precaution, we are going to ask for an extension till May, just as a precaution. But we're hoping we won't need it.
When did you want to ask for that?
I've reached out to our circuit rider to see what we have to do. And so, do you need to make a, pardon? 90 days, yeah. Do you need to make a motion to do that, or can?
Well, we need to send a letter to the state.
Right.
Obviously, I'll have to sign that.
I think I remember her telling me when we got the last review that this would have to go before PLUS, which is the review committee for it. I don't think it will be a problem, but I want to I haven't heard back from her yet as to what the next steps are, but I will, as soon as I find out, I will let you know.
Yeah, Ms. Mayor, please.
I just wanted to point out the request has to be made 90 days in advance, and it expires early February. So right now, we have to find out.
Okay, well, Terry, if you could prepare that, and I'll sign it
Yep.
as soon as you have it.
As soon as I know what
Okay.
to do.
Yeah. Just call me at my house, I'll come
Okay.
over.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
So, Mark, we're talking about going over three,
Uh,
the 6, 7,
No, the whole consolidated.
the whole
Yeah,
thing?
final draft, right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have a problem getting an extension. They waited 2 years when we sent them our first 10-year plan before they approved it, so I think that should be okay. Are there any additional comments from anybody? And I'll ask from the council also, since a bunch of you are here. Okay. All right.
So have we decided whether we're going to email these decisions, or are we going to meet?
I think we could also just, if we can't decide today, we could just decide when we want to do that. But these last 3 chapters, I'll forward as soon as we have that draft back, like I've done with the previous ones.
Okay,
Review them, provide me comments, and we'll get that back incorporated. And then we'll decide if it's
okay.
helpful for the group to spend a little bit of dedicated time going through the whole, all of it in one sort of read, any feedback, and then that could go into the draft that goes to the council.
So we've
Yep.
reviewed the first few chapters at a public hearing, and actually went kind of section by section through it with pretty minor comments. A little wording here, a little typo there. I would suggest that, for the sake of clarity, we don't go back through at the Planning and Zoning Commission level, just because it's already been read in. So we'll make I guess, focus on the remaining chapters, and then as they're transmitted to the town council, we'll make that the sort of official record of them.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I agree. That's a good way to do it. So,
Great.
well, everybody understands what we're doing now, right? Okay. Let's move on to our second item, which is continuation of the proposed tree regulations. These trees are really growing on this.
I'd say this is really our favorite item to talk about.
The greening of Bethany.
So this draft that I shared, that you all have, was the result of a meeting with Susan, John, myself, Terry, and Rosemary, really to consolidate and incorporate the feedback from the previous discussion we had last month, and look at opportunities to incorporate some best practices into the building department homepage, or somewhere on the building department webpage. Start building out a little bit more of a best practice resource area that would be helpful for things like recommendations, this tree species list, possibly photos or other, good examples of what's happening around town specific to trees, landscape, and that can then continue into, other helpful topics that we decide, over time would be a good resource page. So just setting that up, this document here is modified, not significantly from the previous past, but I guess I could just walk through it since we have time. I added up top really just a little bit of a purpose or reason why this is, why I believe it's important, hopefully we believe it's important, and tied it into one of the proposed Green Bethany initiatives that is in the comprehensive plan to increase the tree canopy in town by, I believe we said 5%. So right now it's at 40% to 45% within the next 10 years as a green goal. And this essentially says that for new construction, which is what we all elected to start with for this ordinance, we would require a minimum of 2 trees on a 5,000 square foot lot. Any larger lots would essentially just be divided by, square footage divided by, and if that's a fraction, it would just round up to the next number. So a larger lot would require 3 trees, such as a corner or, some of the west town lots. And then continuing down, just we added in or revised here that the caliper, the trees, and small specimen trees are both allowed. So more of like ornamental trees and smaller specimen trees, thinking crepe myrtles and other things that seem to be desirable. That existing trees, and new trees shall be placed or saved to essentially promote healthy growth and appearance, that it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain trees and replace diseased or dead trees. And then, as I mentioned, we started a list of recommended trees on the back page. This is going to go to the town's contractors, landscape contractors, to review and edit. So these here are starting point that we pulled from another reference document. This is going to change a little bit, but these are trees that we believe for this area are some examples. So we'll continue to sort of build that out and get some feedback on what type of species are recommended for this area, including some salt-tolerant options, which some of those should have some asterisks around. Lots in the R1 and R1B districts located within 2 blocks of the ocean may select salt-tolerant species from the recommended list. This wasn't stated before, but we're just making it a little more obvious that, let your landscaper help you select the right trees for the location of your property. The density shall be met whether lots had trees on them before filing for a permit or, any improvement. So if it's a lot that has no trees currently and a new structure goes on it, it would have to meet this, this requirement. And then mentioned here on the back, second page, best practice, reasonable effort shall be made to save existing healthy and mature trees, such as considering, alternate building design, building location, parking arrangement, coverage, utility locations, et cetera. So this is I know it's hard to enforce a reasonable effort, but we're considering this a best practice that in designing a new structure, take that into account if there's healthy, mature trees. And then added the last item there, issuance of a building permit must be completed before any removal of existing trees, which doesn't exist currently.
Yeah, I have a question on,
Sure.
on the last one, Mark.
Yep.
Or maybe Susan, I don't know. If we have an existing structure and somebody wants to move or remove a tree, do they need a building permit? Does that cover this?
You don't need to have a building permit to remove a tree.
Okay, is that clear somewhere else, or?
What do you mean?
Well, on F, item F says issuance of building permit must be completed before any removal of existing trees.
So this is
That's on the
essentially
lot
if
before
you're,
construction,
yeah,
I think.
if you're new construction, right, because this is all about new construction,
Right.
that would require a building permit. It's just essentially saying that you can't remove or, take down any trees before
Okay.
the issuance of that building permit.
Maybe that would be clearer if we move that to under A as number 3,
Okay.
because we're talking about new
Oh,
construction there.
put A-
There's
Yep.
no requirement for them to notify me at all for if they're taking down a tree.
Right, yeah, you see them all, you see
Yeah.
I think, we're-
Lawsons and everybody all over the place.
yeah, and usually they're pruning or taking one down that maybe they're planted too close together or something. I don't think anyone's removing trees haphazardly on
No, no.
existing lots. But
I
this
thi-
is
yeah.
mostly to clear up them clearing a lot, like the ones were over in Tingle's Addition, and make them think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, the only reason I said, and you do say, Mark, you did right, new construction.
Yep.
So I know, I just want to make sure if somebody sees that, they're not going to go, wait a minute, I need to get a permit.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think that's a better location too. This is a
Yeah.
good recommendation.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So
Kathy.
if I'm the owner of a lot, I have a house on it, I live there, and I have, let's just say, 5 trees, and I just decide I don't want that much shade, I don't want those trees anymore, I need firewood, whatever, I can just cut the trees down? Yeah. Wow.
But, Mr. Chairman, are we going to do the part about, this is just on new construction, are we going to consider
Yeah.
existing
Yeah,
structure?
so
Yeah, I
that's
guess
how we all started.
Okay.
Went back and looked through my 30 pages of notes, truly, and we decided to start with
With
just
this.
new
Okay, that's perfect.
construction
That's perfect.
and
Okay.
then
Just be
see
clear.
how we can modify or add that in. I think it's as easy as just saying, putting a bullet in there that, I think in Kathy's example, you know, existing properties, if those trees are there, you can't just clear cut all of your trees. But if they're not there, then it doesn't apply. But I
We
think
haven't
right
had
now,
that problem, though, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it really hasn't come up as an issue in all the time I've been here. So I think starting with new construction would be really helpful, and I don't see the other as a big problem.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this months ago. My insurance company last year says you have to take that tree out because we're not going to insure you.
right.
Unfortunately, the tree was not on my property. Yeah, so I had to ask permission, but,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it does get a little screwy. I have another question. How is the town going to enforce the dead tree law?
What do you mean?
Well, we say here, if you got a dead tree, you got to take care
Well,
of it.
generally, like, we just had this happen. We had a resident on Hollywood Street point out that there was a dead tree across the street on somebody else's property. The code enforcement officer then goes and looks at it and sends them a letter, and we take care of it.
Okay, so it's just like anything else?
Yeah.
So it is covered, okay?
Yes.
All right.
Actually, on that same topic, though, should that note about maintaining all trees on their lot actually be in that property maintenance section of the code rather than here? And the reason I'm saying that is that this sort of sets up two classes of citizens. Like, right, you have one group that just built a new house and they're required to maintain their trees, and a group that bought an old house and who are not required to maintain their new trees, or not required to maintain any trees.
I think I don't remember all of the property maintenance section, but it's probably covered in there that you can't have unregulated growth and stuff like that. So I don't see that as having been an issue.
So there would be
Think
a
it came from
fine
there.
associated with the tree, or it'd be like grass cutting? If you don't cut your grass, we're gonna come out and cut the grass, and
Yeah, I mean, if there's
Charge
a
you
limb that's
$50.
hanging over somebody else's house, we get notified, we contact the person and have them take care of it. I haven't seen that as being a problem. I mean, we have some problems with properties that are not maintained, but that's a whole issue, and it's usually not just one tree or something. It's
So I guess what I'm asking, I don't have the wherewithal to answer it exactly, but like, let's say 40 years into the future, I built a new house 40 years ago. My neighbor moved into an old house. They want to cut all their trees down, they just can. But because my permit had this note included in it, I can never do anything to my trees. I know it's ridiculous what I'm saying, but like,
Yeah, I think you could do whatever you want as long as you maintain two of them.
right, but I guess what I'm saying is, right.
Right.
Right, but I'm saying that my neighbors who bought the house next door don't have to maintain two of them,
Right, and-
but I have to maintain two of them
that's-
in perpetuity, basically, is the way this is.
Right.
Which I'm saying, I agree with is a good thing, I'm just wondering if that sort of stuff should
Yeah,
actually
well,
be,
it goes along.
should be
for me.
overarching.
It's sort of like we want more tree coverage. So it's like, once it's there, it's gonna be tougher to
Yeah.
get rid of it than,
Yeah.
I have another question going what Scott was bringing up. Okay, so if I have this old house and I decide, and lots of trees on my property, and I decide I want to sell it to a developer, okay? Now, he cannot clear cut it, right? But before I sell it, I could clear cut it, and then he could just remove the house, correct?
I think, yeah, they could make it part of your sales agreement
Yeah.
prior to.
yeah, it could happen that way,
Yeah,
but
okay.
Which is probably just the,
So that's a loophole.
well, and I think that's the reason this isn't where you want to stop with this. You want to actually,
I think if we
Develop
see
an
that
ordinance for all of it.
happening, yeah, we
Yeah.
Um, by the way, I'm fine with it. I understand the spirit of like
So
saying,
these changes are good.
you know, the property owners, you can't get your CO and then come in a week later and chop down the two trees that you were required to put in there for CO. So I get it. I'm just wondering if it should be more, if that note should apply to all properties. And I think, Mark, you said you actually got it from a different section in the code already. So if it's already there, does it need to be here also? Is it redundant for it to be here? Or is it already covered by the?
well, I think what Mark's got here is it highlights it And so that if somebody's reading something, you know, we're just talking trees here, and that, I know to me, as a former code writer, it was always nice to be able to just isolate something if you could. It helps the building inspector.
I think also the reason why we kept this here was because oftentimes new trees that are planted as part of obtaining a CO die, and homeowners then just get rid of it but don't replace it. And you see that sometimes when it goes in at the wrong season, or it's not maintained, or whatever it might be. So maybe it just has to be tweaked a little bit specifically to that. That example. I do feel that building on this at some point, if we could get to a place sometime maybe in 2023 of approving this, building on some sort of language around existing, just to, you know, round out the section. It might be obvious, it might not be happening, but I think some of the questions that came up today, or concerns, were things that we, I believe, we're trying to capture in the earlier versions of this document before we split out new construction. So, and, you know, I think most importantly, you know, trees do have a big impact just from an environmental, you know, quality standpoint. But I think when you walk around a lot of blocks that have multiple new homes on them now have nothing on the lot, and that's going to eventually lead to a less desirable streetscape, in my opinion,
No, I think
for
you-
the town, and that's really why I keep pressing on this. I think it just there's a lot of examples walking around, and I started capturing some photos to roll into this, but you know, ultimately these aren't. You know, these don't have to be significant trees. They could be trees that are maintained or cut or trimmed, you know, to be orderly, but they'll, I think, greatly contribute to the streetscape of the town.
Well, I think it's the character of the town, that,
Right.
you know, we're not Ocean City, where a lot of concrete trees. And, a good
One-
example would be the
One way to
church property right on
yeah.
the other side, where they clear cut the whole front when they sold it for condos.
One way to possibly capture some of the existing lots that are developed would to maybe put something in here that talks about existing developed lots, and then if they go through any changes, like you might see, and I see your points with, what if I want to put a pool in? That means I've got to take out all these trees. I don't want any shade over the tree or this or that. If there was development, more changes going on to them possibly, then they would have to come in with a landscape plan showing that they have retained or are going to put back 2 trees or whatever the requirement would be. And then that would take care of anything undergoing any change. And those that just don't like trees, I guess we just can't help them.
Yeah, I think it's not a very onerous requirement to just say you have to have 2 3-inch trees, and
But if they were doing a change, we could get a landscape plan
Yeah.
that says, here's what we're doing.
yeah, right. If any, like, you could have it triggered where any change, as you said, any permit application that impacts an existing tree just triggers that section there.
Yeah.
John?
Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased with this latest draft. And if we go all the way back, this started when Evergreen Development clear-cut 3 lots. And we found, much to the dismay of many people, and we found that we did not have anything in the code to address that. And we started from that point, and yesterday the town council approved 2 ordinances related to stormwater management and open space and so forth. And we inch ever so slowly towards now having a minimum tree density requirement, beginning with new development. And it just shows to me the effort that and thoughtfulness that's gone into getting to where we are, and we should press on. In that regard, the guidelines, the last page of best practices and all, in discussions that I've had with Mark, we had a much more extensive set of examples. And I would hope that going forward, we can revisit that, Mark. These were recommended growth from various places, like Delaware, but Virginia, and so forth, that one dealt with saltwater tolerant trees and so forth. And I don't find the last page, which we currently have, for those that are listening in or whatever, of just Chapter 507, small ornamental trees category, medium trees and large trees, that needs to be expanded on and all. I happen to have planted a bald cypress in my backyard, which I got free from Delmarva Power. They sent me a picture and said, if you would like to put a tree, show us where, and we'll send you a free one, and they did. And so I was looking for bald cypress and didn't see it. That's just an example. But I do think that the best practices guidelines needs to be revisited to be more expansive.
Yeah, I think Mark took care of that. If you look at the title above that last
It's a
page.
draft.
It's a draft for landscape and nursery review, and I agree,
Yeah.
the tree I have is not in there either, but I don't think we can mention every tree at all, but,
No, but excuse me, Mr. Chairman, there are already out there examples of resources more expansive than this that would apply for like the ocean blocks as an example for somebody wanting to do that and so forth. And so,
Yeah, I agree. I think that the best practice is a work in progress, and would love any input from this group or audience as well. But there are, to John's point, I found at least 5, 6, 7 articles with a quick search that are at least Mid-Atlantic, East Coast communities that have similar guidelines. I think vetting them so they're truly applicable to this region or our town is a step that Susan offered to help with in terms of getting some professional input and just resolving that for this guide. And so I'll certainly continue to work on that. I want to mention one other thing. I just pulled up the section here where I keep referencing that this would sit within Chapter 507, Article 2, Trees on Private Property. This is a one-pager section in the code currently. The first heading is Notice to Remove Diseased Unsafe Trees, Appeals Costs, and that really outlines everything that's happening in that item 4 we were talking about maintenance. So that would almost introduce and complement the work that's happening, the work that we're just talking about within this section. It talks about emergency situations and violations and penalties, but it doesn't articulate anything else, specific to trees. So I think that's the natural spot in the code where this would sit, and then I should have probably added that up here so we could have reviewed it all together. But
Mark, do you have a feeling of when you want to discuss, bring it onto the agenda again? I know it's a tough time of year, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a hurry. We've spent a lot of time, so I think we could shoot for looking at a final version in January, if that's fine.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
So we'll put that on the agenda for January. Mark, excellent. Thank you
Yeah,
very
sure.
much.
Happy to help.
Appreciate it. Okay. Yes, sir.
Testing, yes. A minor point, back on that list of trees, under small ornamental trees, it says Bradford pear. I'm pretty sure that's a no-no these days. It's considered invasive. I read I'm not an arborist, but I've read several articles about it, because I had one back when I lived in Albany. So I think they don't want those anymore. You might want to check on that, Mark.
Yeah, I think they split in storms.
Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah,
the same thing.
that was the street tree they planted all throughout Rehoboth, which then they had to get rid of.
Well, thank you. I think we
Long
can
ago.
agree that maybe we ought to take that one down before the wind takes it down. Good. Thank you for the comment. Yes, sir. Yeah, no.
Maybe under the list of trees, we might include some more that are native trees to here, like the American holly,
Holly.
the loblolly pine, which we have lots of them right over here in the park. Also, black gum, water oak, and sweet gum are pretty much prevalent throughout the area, and they're all native, all here naturally.
Okay. Andrea, could you send those comments to Mark of the trees that you just mentioned, just for his information? Thank you, appreciate it. We're having a public hearing here. This is, Patrick, you have something to say? Jerry?
Spend a couple more weekends with us.
I do have a comment. I built a home here, well, back in the 80s, and I put my retirement home here in 2010, and we put in 7 trees because the lot was cleared. In that period of time, 3 of those trees went from 3 inches to like 12 inches. They grew like crazy. And as a result of that, they worked, because of the ground situation, they worked their way into the foundation of the house.
Yep.
And I had to have them taken down. Now, what are you gonna do if you have 2 trees and one of them, I mean, we gotta have something that allows people to take these trees down if they have a problem that's invading on their house.
Well, I think that's in there, isn't it?
Did you consider moving into the tree? 'Cause you could have done that. Let the tree have the house, you take the tree. No, you could take that tree down.
Yeah.
You would, I think in some future version of this, you might be required to replace it with a 3-inch
Yeah, which
caliper
is-
tree at that point. But you could take that tree that's a problem down.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the
certain
code
trees that
speaks
do
to that and sort of the emergency situations, if I'm reading this correctly. But yeah, I think to Scott's point, it's a matter of, you know, I think if we're going to require it, and someone's going to have landscaping done, that hopefully the person helps them site it initially for health and success, but and the right type of tree. So, I mean.
So, no, you didn't consider moving into the tree? Just- Yeah. Yeah, I think as Mark pointed out, there's an allowance for pretty small species of trees. So we're not saying you have to, you can plant a loblolly pine if you want, and it's gonna get big quick. Or you can plant something more ornamental. So, and that would have to be,
Yeah.
Moving forward, with the ordinances we just passed yesterday, you're gonna have to have that minimum amount of natural area somewhere, and those two trees are going to have to fall into that
And
more
over
than likely.
there, black pine is one of those salt-type trees, and you can really trim a black pine.
We can't hear you, Jerry.
There's a disease that's going around and it's wiping out, I think it's the black pines. My neighbor had to die on her lot, and I had to get after John Apple for a couple of years because she refused to take them down. But those things were starting to evade into all the other trees along the dune. So finally, she did take them down. But it is a problem with pines here.
Okay, good. Again, thanks, Mark. Excellent as usual. Oh, boy,
That's fast.
look at the time.
You
We're
beat
ju-
your
we're-
record.
We're getting there. John, you trying to delay me here?
No, Mr. Chairman, but we currently have a partitioning agreement or partitioning petition that we are going to address in December.
That's why I was ready to go on.
And I would like to just ask you as chairman if you could inquire of the building inspector as to the urgency of doing that. So that if there isn't an urgency, we might consider canceling the December meeting. But if the applicant says that they're ready to go, we have an obligation to address it. And, you know, I'm speaking for myself, ready to be here in December. But I would just ask that you might inquire at some point.
Yeah,
We already have.
yeah, that was my next statement. Good, you always read my mind, John. I did talk to Susan, and it's something that we are gonna have to, we should proceed with the December meeting. It's been advertised.
I
As
will,
Susan,
I will contact the applicants and ask them if they are, if it is possible to postpone it till January, and I will send out an email about what their needs are.
That's
yeah,
fair.
it's a little
That's fair.
complicated,
That's fair.
and it's gonna take a while. It's the only thing we're gonna put on the agenda. It'd be very quick, but as Susan said, if they're agreeable, we will not have a January meeting. If they need it
You mean December.
done,
Wait a minute.
we will. So
Hey.
right now, we're gonna have
Yes, yeah, just-
a December meeting.
December.
Just so we know that they do have plans pending
Yeah,
for this, so.
yeah, it will be, whatever their needs are, we'll meet that. But that will be the only item that we're going to discuss at December meeting. Okay. So, summary is, thank you, commissioners. You beat the 1 hour time limit we like to hit. I appreciate that. Again, thanks, Mark, for all your tree work.
Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thanks, audience, for all your tree work. You've done a very good job. I want to just take a second and wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy yourselves, and we will either see you next month or in January. And if we don't see you next month, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everything else. Are there any comments from the commissioners you'd like to make?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Impressive.
The situation with Jerry is